Join me in the audio garden to cultivate our collective wisdom, nurture creativity, and spread love. My name is Martha Senator. Welcome to Listen and Be Heard. Welcome to this special spot, my friends. This place of peace and poetry, where we cultivate the art of writing and listening, speaking and being heard. We have a special guest, a friend from New York City, visiting the garden. Latasha Diggs has written a mind-bending book of poetry, and she is going to talk with me about her process. Coming up in the second part of our precious hour here together, we will hear from poets Amber Rose and Ameera Shabazz, brought to you by the people's poet, Tony Robles. Let's start with the first of a 5-part poem we will hear today, entitled Kombucha by Latasha Diggs.
Kombucha. At first, pacifier, less, a thumb offers most. The heart tremors among the first beating. In Paris, I bathe with naked women wrinkled in tart. The heavy post-war memory of fossilized sinks. Who hides beneath mosaic and Cadillac chips? I am here to love me, cursed haunch and dimpled bottom. Scrub me spoiled with loafa till their arms tire my skin, a bright pink cashew refuted by the hearts of suns. Am I the only lonely in this hammam cast out? Commandments and confirmations, haven't we all been soured? Honor thy father, mother, thy suitor, lover, thy wedded, themselves foolish. Foolish me with dreams, somehow the movers were never booked. Bellies, never swollen pearls. In former lives, I was all brides.
Welcome to the audio garden, Latasha Diggs. I'm so happy to have you here after all these years. I know you from, just crossing paths in the 90s in New York City. So, what have you been up to?
I've been doing a lot. I've been living. I have been living. I've been working. I've been writing. I have been performing occasionally.
And you've published a new book called Village.
Yes, my second book.
There's so many things I want to say about this book and so many questions, but I think I want to start by saying that what I love about it most is what I remember about you in performance in the 90s, which is that it's so dynamic and so musical in the very sort of ancient sense of poetry being song. And I just want to ask you how you think about it. And I want to ask you, how do you think about the page versus the stage, like the music of language as you hear it?
I haven't been thinking much about the stage lately for many reasons. With the work inside a village, the easiest way to explain it was that I had to reckon with one thing, that I write a particular way, I write in a particular style. There's things that I am listening for.
What do you listen for?
I listen for words beside other words. I listen for tensions within syntax and within order and ordering,
And not in one language.
and not in one language. No. I listen to the composition played out on the paper. And also I listen for tension. I listen for tension and I'm looking for tension. Not not all the time with how the words are constructed, but in terms of what is the story that I'm attempting to convey.
Several times while I was sitting here reading some of these poems today, I thought about Pedro Pietri, and I wondered how well you knew him, or if you feel like he was an influence on you.
I wasn't thinking about Pedro necessarily. I was thinking about Miguel Pinheiro on one occasion. And I can't say I was thinking about one person the entire time because the manuscript itself, I began writing it in 2006. It went through its phase between 2006 and 2008. Then I put it in a box and ran away from it.
Why did you do that?
Why did I do that? Because I wasn't
Yes.
ready. I wasn't ready. I wasn't ready, and also the tone, what it was between 2006 and 2008, was a very different book because this had directly followed the passing of my mother in 2006. So when you think about grief and mourning, there's waves, there's particular, there's waves of things that come in and out. And so the grief at that moment was on one wave. Um, Other waves occurred during the years, which meant other things were discovered or needed to be dealt with, to be faced, to be confronted with. Um, Things that were left unsaid between my mother and I. Grandmothers rub away who wronged me. 3 wishes ambered. Brides don't keep dirty kitchens. Toes flinch as the Korean woman files. Never had my feet been tended to. Never had anyone present themselves as example. The hammam was peaceful. Oakland's mani-pedi busy. Soured pearls roll off my forehead. Dow's cheeks, clipped nails. Teach me. Step out, foot so spoiled. Ask for 10 minutes more. Needing needs opened heart. I shrink inside the steamed, seasoned, slurp pineapple tea. Pause, my heels absent callous, shoulders oiled, almond and olive soap, nursed and cursed view in a reoccurring dream for mommy's skull, a flab with flesh, she who cared less for stiff necks or gouty ankles. Legion of poor, unpolished women, dull moments, faint blood drips past one vessel. What secrets am I among?
This is the Listen and Be Heard Hour for readers and writers. I'm Martha Senator, and I'm speaking with poet Latasha Diggs about her book, Village. If you had to step back a couple years to get to that, I think that's a message for, and many women, maybe not just of our generation, but certainly of our generation, who are having these complicated memories and feelings about our mothers and the parts they played in some of our difficulties in dealing with, just being women in this world, I think, for one thing. Also, I felt this tension you're talking about so strongly, and the rhythm in the tension that really came out in front for me with this book. But it's also a visual thing to look at. The first thing I see is your food stamp card, EFT. And I remember that I had one when I was a single mother, and I think you knew my daughter at the time, or met her once maybe. And another one for your mother, and you have some other documentation all through this book of actual photographs from your life in New York City. But also, the typography is so interesting. Maybe I'm using the wrong word because some of it is more about the punctuation. Could you explain to me where these 4 dots in a square? I've never seen that before. And then you have poems that are arranged geometrically in different shapes and in different languages at the same time. So there's a lot for somebody to get lost in a page in here for a while.
Well, when you ask about typography, I think you're talking about how I'm utilizing colons, double colons and periods and space.
Why would you use a double colon?
I'm using it to indicate something that is missing or something to be listed or added to the conversation, but also not being spoken. There's something that I'm deliberately not including, thus giving you the double colon and the space. There's also the thing where I was thinking a lot about concrete poetics, concrete poetry, not deliberately forming or shaping any particular poem into something, but wanting to kind of enact or activate a notion of something being torn down, whether it's a home or a memory or a place. The backstory is that during the last 2 years of living in my place on 111th Street, the building was sold. Many of the people voluntarily just left, leaving a handful of us who were just going to hold out.
What year are we talking about?
We're talking 2021, 22, right? So 2020 was a difficult year for the most part. It was a difficult year because of the pandemic, but also a weird and eerie year because everything was shut down, right? Nobody was able to go anywhere. Everything's quiet. What does that sound like in a building where there's maybe 3 remaining occupants, a building that would normally have all 21 apartments housing people? What does a building sound like during a pandemic when there's only 3 occupants in the building? That becomes part of the editing process. What does a building feel like or sound like when it's being demolished and you live right next door to the demolition? That becomes part of the editing process. What do gutted out apartments right next door to you look like? That then becomes a visual mapping, a visual template for how poems are formed, how poems are laid out and composed. And then also what happens with each of those apartments, right, is not only the demolishing or the gutting out of the actual materials. What's also being demolished is the history of that apartment, is the memory associated with that apartment, is the memory of someone that you knew, right? Whether they were a true neighbor or whether they were a come and go person, that memory, that history associated with that door, with that doorknob, with that apartment, you're seeing erased, right? And because, we talk a lot about the G word, I'm not even going to say it, but you know what I'm talking about, the G word. And it's like, this is what the G word looks like. And also, this is what displacement looks like, right? But then this is also what the erasure of spatial memory looks like. And that's why things not only become muddy, but the composition becomes a thing of switching from present to past. Um, Knowing that this book could not be linear from beginning to start, but rather these kind of like spirals or infinity symbols that kind of go jumping from past to present, because this is how time is is happening. Once we lived in a railroad tenement, have dreamt my mommy's death among mothers down the block. The shells say to rub her hands like the working women we never afforded. Lotion forearms that work menthol into a sibling's chest. Who on the other side of the curtain? As elbow pressed against shoulder blade, I cursed myself for prolonging sores spent on frivolous leisure, all guilt up. What is weak? Every knot of muscle is as calloused as the heart. Tearing nerves cry out, Mommy, only Mommy scratched my back. Why olive branches never soured thrashed against this flesh that now sags. Into the cold pool I go. The Russians immune to steam and hot rocks is how one releases daytime stories. So simple, a late bloom or late loving studies. These are the rituals of the unanointed.
How did you start? Because I knew you as going around as a very dynamic spoken word poet. Were you always interested in the visual printed word? And how did you get, from being in this kind of situation that you describe in the poetry in your book to being such a, obvious scholar and accomplished writer? I want to try to understand, like, what was your journey into this, now your second poetry publication?
I think, I don't think the journey is final final yet. I think how I really stepped to the mic, shall we say, my introduction to the mic is largely due to a very old friend of mine's named Ricardo Hislop, who used to work at Tower Records. Ricardo had saw some of my writing because I wrote in a notebook, scribbles, what have you. And he said, "Oh, you should write music reviews." And I was like, okay. Now, at the time he's asking me this, I am nowhere near thinking of myself as a writer, thinking of myself as a poet. A career as a writer is the furthest from anything. I'm basically working either at Antique Boutiques, which used to be on Broadway, next to Unique's store. Unique store is now the NYU bookstore. But right prior to working at Antique Boutique in retail, I'm working as a dancer at the Palladium. And by dancer, I mean I'm working as a dancer. I'm one of the cage dancers. I'm one of the dancers in the cage with the hot shorts. I'm working as a cage dancer. So the first review, music review that I do, thanks to Ricardo introducing me to the music editor over at the Source magazine, was a music review for Give a Monkey a Brain and He'll Swear He's the Center of the Universe by Fishbone, right? Which was probably their most well known album. And so, and then that looked like something that looked like a possibility. So I started to write a little bit more. Would I say I started taking myself seriously? Seriously, not yet. I'm just making, oh, it's like I make $50 here, I make $75 here. I did attend one open mic, one slam at the Neo Rican. I did not stay for the next rounds because I had to be at work at the Palladium. So that's my level of seriousness with slam.
Right. I always had to get home to the babysitter.
I had to be at work, I'm writing little reviews, trying to work my way up. And also then hitting a roadblock in that I don't really know how to write. I'm writing, but I don't really know the mechanics of writing. I would say that I still don't. I'm just a little bit better.
It seems to me like you've created your own structure of writing because it's such a woman's story. Now you have an MFA and 2 books of poetry, and you teach. How did you get from that beginning point into, the discipline of school and taking this on of being a writer, to the point where now, you're teaching writing?
In some ways, I didn't have a choice. It was either like, okay, make a decision because you can't keep going on like this. I am the daughter of men. I am the last offspring fathered by a numbers runner. Apparently, among whisperers, gated windows hurry to clear wax out the ears of women, ratchet blue jays perched on stoops stop and stare at this child. Who she favor? Frankie the Italian or the Puerto Rican? The Jew? Didn't even know his true name to be Marion. Mommy cursed the gossip with a pinch of snuff. Bottom lip tucked, black spit marks their paths, cross, break backs, daughter of cotton pickers and Newports, hearts fatty on liquor and crackling salt pork, afterbirth soaks into the grout. See? This here? This where I popped out of mommy. The later contraction came late. Thought I was a cramp. What to do with sitting water? Sour limestone useless for a cradle bulb. Birth. Oh my. What did they, women, daughters of men, swaddle me with that afternoon? What was the weather? She never felt it. Too numb by spirits, by daughters, by the unwed.
This is the Listen If You Heard Hour for readers and writers. I'm Martha Senator here in the audio garden where poet Latasha Diggs is our special guest. We'll speak a little more and hear the 5th part of Kombucha. Also coming up in the 2nd part of the hour, some poetry from Amber Rose collected by Tony Robles, who buzzes around a lot from open mic to open mic, collecting poetry like nourishing nectar for our souls. And Ameera Shabazz submitted some poetry to Tony that we will also be playing today. First, Latasha's thoughts on banning books and an announcement for next week.
The Bluest Eye by Toni Morrison.
Once it's heard, it can't be unheard. Once it's published, it's not going to be unpublished. Once you read the poem, you can't unread it. No matter how an individual may try to push it to the side, forget about it, it's still in there. And it's the words, the meaning, the feelings behind it are taking root in their psyche, and they can't get rid of it.
By Sarah J. Maas. This book is gay by Juno Dawson.
As I've been asking almost all of our guests, if you have anything to say about the banning of books that's going on from one end of this country to the other.
All I can say, very short, briefly, is that the banning of books is goofy. It's goofy. It makes no sense. I can say what everybody else has said in terms of like we're going backwards. We're going backwards in so many areas that touch the lives of everyone in this country. I can only say that it's goofy. And I can say that even the counterattack, which would be to then ban the books of the right, which is happening, right, is counterproductive. It's goofy.
The banning of books is goofy. That's a new one, but I absolutely agree.
It wasn't that long ago that most of us in this country were engaged in farming.
Tune in April 10th to the Listen and Be Heard Hour with your host, Martha Senator, when she's joined once again by the author of the Ethical Meat Handbook, Meredith Lee, for another edition on regional climate and agricultural resilience.
It used to be that we fed ourselves action without fossil fuels, without chemicals, without processed foods.
Their conversation continues on alternatives to capitalism, and they focus on the idea of the common wheel, raised in Laura Legnick's book, Agricultural Resilience.
I'm not one of these folks who are saying go back.
Let's go back.
There are probably some really good ideas that we could bring forward and make it part of the solution to climate change.
That's all coming up on the Listen and Be Heard Hour for readers and writers.
This is the Listen and Be Heard Hour for readers and writers. I'm Martha Senator. Latasha is lingering a little longer in the garden to share just a little more of her thoughts and the final part of her poem, Kombucha. Her new book is entitled Village. The poem Kombucha, presented to you today in 5 parts, is written and performed by Latasha Diggs. The sound design and production for those 5 segments by Jeannie Hopper. The samples and sound effects are under Creative Commons license sourced from the Free Music Archive and freesound.org. You can go to listenandbeheard.net for the full list of those credits, and you'll find those on the post for this episode 11 of season 2 of the Listen and Be Heard Hour for readers and writers. This is Listen and Be Heard Radio, WLBH.org. Welcome to the audio garden. Let's cultivate our collective wisdom, nurture creativity, and spread love. This is the Listen and Be Heard Hour for readers and writers. I'm Martha Senator. And I'm speaking with poet Latasha Diggs about her book, Village.
It came down to like, okay, I am a poet. Do I like my work? And that was something that I said to myself a while ago. And it was like, no, I don't think my stuff is growing. I don't think my stuff is improving. And I don't think the circle of folks that I want to be involved with, or have been involved with, are helping nurture that, right? None of us are really changing. So I need to do something about that. I need to learn more, right? And so that happened through my introduction with this organization called Cave Canem. Cave Canem is this organization for African American writers. That's the smaller definition, but it's largely Black writers on the African diaspora. And it was through my attending my very first writer's workshop with Cornelius Eddy, and then, later on going to the retreat that they held, being in a community with just a wellspring of just different writers. You find your peoples. I found my literary peoples. I found my artistically wacky writer peoples within that. And that planted the seed.
And I imagine the confidence as well gave you some confidence in that.
It gave me a sounding board. It gave me a handful of folks who could read my work and tell me what I'm doing and maybe what I should be thinking about, where I might want to push myself. With the open mic format, which is still, ground zero for so many folks, it could be the thing where you just write crowd pleasers, right? And I didn't want to write crowd pleasers anymore.
I want to thank you so much for spending this time with me. What's the best way for people to find out more about Latasha Diggs?
You can follow me on Instagram. I'm Latasha.Diggs at Instagram. I occasionally post things up there in terms of what I'm doing. I have a couple of dates coming up. I'm going to be at UC Berkeley the week of April 10th. I'll be doing a reading there. And I'll be in New Orleans for the New Orleans Poetry Festival on April 20th through the 21st.
The book, once again, is on Coffee House Press, and I think it's available pretty much everywhere.
You can order it directly through Coffee House. If it's not in your bookstores, request it. I strongly encourage people to request it at your local bookstores. Publishing has been very different. The publishing game has been very different since COVID.
That's true. You can support indie bookstores and indie publishers at the same time. I interviewed Meg Reed from Hub City Publishers, which is the one indie publisher in the entire state of South Carolina. So that gives people an idea of the kind of, the balance of the scales in terms of publishing. And I want to thank you so much for your time, Latasha. We talked for a little while here in the Audio Garden, the Listen and Be Heard Hour for readers and writers. My name is Martha Senator, and I've been talking with Latasha Diggs about her book, Village Poems. Thank you so much.
Thank you for having me. The Encounter says I am smooth like a baby and butter. that I am a fire hydrant's valve flush open. The side of my fist slinks into a second's gap between us, where made noticeable the morning after is the trace of a Zoptic body and scent from earlier that day. I won't mind. It's not for commentary. The craft of indifference. What is mine? What I don't own? How dare the nerve? His mouth, the stench of tobacco. I caution and implore toothpaste to get the night on. His chest is silverback flypaper. Murdoch and Marvin, what a duet that would have been. An offspring overhead carries an unlikely male sun garden snake, and the sky shifts from rainbow marble to shears of Pantone 15-40-20. In the clouds, a daughter dreams me, a plump thigh, chanteuse, relaxed, spooned, and selfish.
Thanks to Latasha Diggs for spending some time here in the audio garden with us. Please visit us at listenandbeheard.net to listen to the interview again if you would like to. Follow links to more about her book and sign up for our email newsletter so that you can tune in to writers who interest you. Let's listen now to Amber Rose read from her first chapbook entitled Harboring the Imperfect. Then we will hear Too Much to Mourn, submitted to the Listen and Be Heard Hour for Readers and Writers by Ameera Shabazz.
You receiving pupil, take all of the rain in the world and dye it pastel blue. This is your eyes, aloof as marbles. If you were heaven, you'd be made from glass, alone in your glass heaven and your golden, crying hair.
We wear too much black to mourn. We mourn too much to love. We love too much to hate. We hate too much to smile. We smile too much to cry. We cry too much to stop praying. We pray too much to fight. We fight too much to die. We die too much to stop wearing black. We move south, ironic. South ain't even ever been free. South of USA, south of the border, south of Africa, south of Gaza. We can't get out. And sometimes west is south. Ask Geronimo, ask Joaquim of the West Bank, ask Mama Lou who sips wine, building tracks, crossing lands that ain't never pushed her people into laundry cellars, washing away tears from trails, or was it the trail of tears? Move north in open gardens. Apartheid isn't real. They call it segregation. Gated communities, white clean of thorns, because people and folks wore them in their knees, praying for buses to bust them, to drop them over invisible lines they call borders. They made real walls that reached so high, they touched the sky, mourned from the touch, sadness, soundless from the walls, because the people were deaf. God made them that way, and they made themselves God, you know. The silence is eerie. Cries from non-humans are muffled. We once cried from working hard, cried to buy freedom, and then we learned freedom looked like landless open cages everywhere we went. The silence is eerie. The earth shakes from the pounding of boots, and we wonder, where have all the flowers gone? Flowers are fed from red liquid, which pours from eyelids, begging to shut and we wear too much black to mourn, and we mourn too much to love.
Thanks to Ameera Shabazz for reading that poem and for submitting it to the Listen and Be Heard Hour for Readers and Writers. It was actually a video that she submitted, and if you visit our post for this show at listenandbeheard.net, which you can find right on the front page, you will find a link to the video, which is really nice to look at. We're happy that Ameera Shabazz was heard here in the Audio Garden, and we invite you, our listeners, to submit your poetry, your thoughts about banning books, and more by visiting us at listenandbeheard.net. You can find out how to submit, how to volunteer, how to join our email newsletter, produce a show for WLBH.org, and a whole lot more. I haven't spoken much lately about my journey to publication because the only thing I can say right now is that I got another rejection from a small press that I submitted to during their open reading period. Since I didn't get any feedback, I really have no idea why it was rejected or if it even really got a reading. What I have been working on is the query letter. Because who knows, maybe they just didn't like my query letter and they didn't read my manuscript at all. I also shared a few pages during the Bandit Queen Press counter storytelling workshop led by Leslie Ann Brown, which I participated in, which is the closest I've gotten to an open mic type situation for this manuscript. So since that reading got recorded and I got some positive feedback, I thought I would share that with you today. Since it's 5 pages from the middle of the novel, I'll set you up with a little from my query letter, and y'all can tell me what you think if you feel so inclined. It's 1997 New York City. Justice has given birth on stage on a Friday night and is now detained over the weekend on charges of lewd conduct, writing her testimony. She tries to tell her story in a way that will get her infant and her teenage daughter returned to her. Cash is her prop. New York City is her stage. Justice reminds people that our national motto is, "In God We Trust." She points to it on our money when she pays for things and asks people to say, "Amen." Like her orphaned grandmother, she studies at the New York Public Library. After learning of her grandmother's death in the morning, she travels from her East Harlem apartment to a Midtown radio station, Union Square, and finally, the event that she hosts in Lower East Side. Telling the story of the origins of the motto "In God We Trust" and the history of finances in the city, she points to her place in patriarchy and questions her grandmother and God. The other daughter of a famous financier, she is shadowed by a mysterious photographer, endures being held up, shot at, rude remarks, and needing to pee, while her older sister stares at her from billboards on buses and subway cars. We pick up with Justice in Union Square.
So the name of the chapter is The Root of All. When I got to Union Square, I stopped to conversate with George. I always do because he's always there. He points the way, sitting high on his horse, surrounded by bushes and flowers that are surrounded by a low, irrelevant fence. Nothing like that old iron garden gate. There's a dripping red letter A spray painted at human height inside imperfect red circle on the massive granite base that his horse prances on way over our heads. He's holding his hat in the crux of his arm as if he knows the solemnity of the moment, even while it's happening. Word has gotten around that George is coming back from where the loyalists chased him to. People are living in houses pieced together from old ship parts because there was a fire. No one knows how it got started, but it burned half the town down. Those prisoners I was telling you about who couldn't jump ship are starving on the water, just out of reach, right there in the bay. Everyone who is left, still calling themselves patriots, gets in line behind George when he shows up on horseback like Marcus Aurelius. They slog through the final steps of war with Daddy George pointing those loyalists out to sea. And Sir Guy leaves all honorable-like, and they toast him at Francis Tavern after he's gone. Then the Union daddies set up their new corporation right away, right there, facing Union Plaza. And they get the idea to cut the island up into a grid. But Union Plaza didn't fit because Broadway cut right through their tidy grid on a diagonal. And it wasn't going to go away because it was there before all the rest. Broadway was Wickwaspeck, before Daddy Cornelius even came across the water. So the daddies decide that there should be a fenced-in park right there with a huge iron gate that they can keep locked. So those pesky poor people they rely on to work around the clock won't disturb their peace when they want to stroll in their manicured European-style garden. And then, after a while, the hood gets too crowded for them and they move uptown where they get old and die and the garden goes wild, and the new daddies decide it's time to tame the whole neighborhood because they're worried about whether they're still in control all the time. They get together to make it better for the common good, and they tear down the gate and say it's a new kind of day, and now everything's going to be wide open for everyone because they want to have patriotic parades and public displays and pageantry to sway people's perceptions, and they come up with putting Daddy George up there to signify the spot and keep the real estate hot, and having the first parade right there where George declared victory and sent those old daddies to sea. They decide to do it on July 4th, which was close enough to 73 years after the original parade, and they make sure to get their names on the base of the statue to live on after they're gone. And then after they finally are gone, the muckers and the sandhogs come to dig a subway line, and the Parks Department moves George and his horse and his pedestal into storage, and then bring him out in pieces and put him back together where he is now, which isn't where he was before. But our daddies are always rearranging things. Now, they don't want parades anymore. It's been out of control. Going back to when Emma and all those anarchist and socialist immigrants come running from Germany and Poland and France and Italy because of stuff they're saying and doing that the daddies there don't like, and they won't stop talking about freedom of speech when they get here and start meeting in Union Square no matter how many times the police trot in, knocking laborers' heads from their high horses. But then the anarchists start fighting with the unionists over Labor Day versus May Day versus Patriots Day and all that. And the gray lady muddled it up and told the story from the point of view of the daddies and made it deadly and dissuaded public opinion from freedom with their fear tactics. These days, there's a few stragglers out here talking about their freedom to hate on people, and our daddies talk about the Constitution like it's religion, like it's the Bible, and those founding fathers are just short of God and ready to stand in for God at any time, like they can't tell the difference. So maybe we can't either, and you have to get a permit to do anything in Union Square, but they won't let you do anything, just some things. There's a daddy bookstore. There's a billboard hanging up higher than George on his horse selling American Dream blue jeans made in China. I looked into the giant eyes of an anorexic teenager from all the way across the plaza. Her daddy Calvin jeans are skin tight, her eyes heavily shadowed, suggesting a heroin addiction. Some things stay the same. Back in George's day, they called it laudanum. Back in old Daddy Calvin's day, they just burned her at the stake. It keeps girls going with the grind of business when they get unagreeable about things. I thought about the lineage from George to the billboard. George is pointing the oppressors to sea, and then everyone thanks him for setting us free. And There's a story that they wanted to make him king, but he stands up for freedom for all the daddies in the corporation. The girl up there on the billboard, she's a sidekick on the scene. She's nameless, not a thought in her head. But I'm supposed to want to look like her and spend my script to squeeze into some blue blood denim jeans. You're supposed to be free now too, I yelled up to her. We cannot remain inarticulate about the tic-tacs. But maybe she doesn't know much about the tic-tacs because she has cute little perky breasts and doesn't need a halter to keep them from swinging around and bumping into each other. She's not even all the way grown. I think I was channeling Mama Emma. Maybe Emma and Grandma were related somehow. I forgot to mention her grandmother just died. And I just don't know the connection, but really, I think I was channeling her, even though she doesn't have a statue in Union Square. I felt people looking at me. They were listening, not to me, to Lady Liberty. She's dressed up in a costume. I know you never saw her pregnant, but why not? It wouldn't keep her from holding her torch up. I thought they were listening, but maybe I was just a spectacle. I didn't have a box to stand on, but I raised my voice to take the opportunity to speak truth. I don't claim to know the whole truth, but the parts that I know, I'm telling you, they are my truth. I took the stage. Dear fathers, you founded us wanting. We're still in this agreement with hell. If you couldn't tell right from wrong, what does it matter what you meant to say? You should stay in the past where you belong, sincerely pursuing happiness. Someone yelled, "Right on, Lady Liberty." I'll stop there. Thank you for listening.
Thank you so much for joining me today in the audio garden. The time always goes by so fast, but I feel refreshed by the breeze and the conversation and your company. Please join us next week when Meredith Lee and I will be talking more about alternatives to capitalism and honing in on the concept of the common weal that Laura Langnick talks about in her book, Resilient Agriculture. This is the Listen and Be Heard Hour for readers and writers. I'm Martha Senator. I want to thank Davian Dial for introducing Listen and Be Heard to the broadcast airwaves at WPVM in Asheville, North Carolina. We are also heard on KCEI in Taos, New Mexico, and WLBH.org in Greenville, South Carolina, and around the world. Thank you to DJ Jeannie Hopper, my associate producer, J. Rodriguez Sierra, who provides background music and loops, and you can learn more about him at jrodriguezsierra.com. Jeremiah Cothran does editing for us. Yvette Murray is the voice in the banned books segment of our show. Tony Robles is my co-host and a contributor. Living It is produced by DJ Jeannie Hopper and Sabina Wertman. Released on Liquid Sound Lounge Records and the CD Living It. My name is Martha Senator, and I want to thank you for listening and for the opportunity to be heard.
Living it, giving it, having it, taking it, moving it, shaking it, creating it, loving it. Living it is loving it. twisting each stitch with magic, creating a unique design, putting it on and wearing it the rest of your life. Living it is knowing that what you see, what you hear is tangible. It's being a rock in the river and being the river too. It's hearing, you'll never be able to do that. Living it is knowing you will do it. It's speaking the unspoken. It's thinking the unthinkable. It's doing the unexpected. It's quitting before you get fired. Living it is giving it is having it is taking it is moving it, shaking it, creating it, loving it. Living it is loving it. Living it is loving a man you're not supposed to love. It's giving way to emotions, creating commotions, calling attention to yourself. And I got that. Living it is learning from someone who can actually show you. It's cleaning your teacher's house or helping her to find one. It's never ever saying J-O-B. Living it is a one-way ticket and no solid plans. It's smoking a J in a smoke cafe in Amsterdam. It's saying the day is pretty in a strange new city. Living it is giving it is having it is taking it is moving it, shaking it, creating it, loving it. Living it is having nothing to lose and everything to gain. It's putting all of your charms and attributes, every single one of them, to good use. It's knowing the kindness of strangers and love for sale. Living it is knowing where to buy rice and beans in bulk. It's knowing herbs are cheaper than doctors. It's keeping it together when you're falling apart. It's writing poetry to ease a broken heart. Living it is knowing the stage, looking into bright lights, late nights, barroom fights, fantastic sights, inspiration.